On This Week in Enterprise Tech, exploits, Microsoft's freemium Office, and all the enterprising you can bear underwater. Twight on the set.
Netcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is Twit.
Bandwidth for This Week in Enterprise Tech is provided by CacheFly at CacheFly.com.
This is Twight, This Week in Enterprise Tech, episode 115, recorded November 7th, 2014 for November 10th, 2014. Hangin' with the Geeks, underwater. This Week in Enterprise Tech is brought to you by PagerDuty. PagerDuty increases alerting noise for IT operations and developers to ensure that the right engineers are notified at the right time. Increase your uptime and sign up for a 14-day free trial at pagerduty.com/twit. And by Mandrill. Mandrill is a scalable, reliable, and secure email infrastructure service trusted by more than 300,000 customers. Sign up at mandrill.com, promo code TWIT, and you'll receive 50,000 free email sends per month for your first 6 months of service. Welcome to Twight, This Week in Enterprise Tech. It's the show dedicated to the enterprise professional, the IT pro, and the geek who just wants to know how the world is connected. I'm your host, Father Robert Ballecer, the digital Jesuit, your guide to all things in the enterprise. And I'm joined by my regular cast of characters, starting with Mr. Brian Chee. Now, Brian, you just got off a boat, so it's good to have you back, sir. How you doing?
I am a little pinky. I got some pink eye that I got from my roommate. Thank you very much for that. And oh, by the way, I was at the Microsoft store yesterday trying to spend money on a Microsoft band, but there's no band. Microsoft, I take a medium. Thank you.
Microsoft, take his money. Also joining us is Mr. Curtis Franklin from Information Week Radio. Curtis, it's great to have you as a representative of the right coast. How are things in Florida?
Things in Florida are just fine. Most of the East Coast is getting ready for the return of the polar vortex next week, but things are looking good in the Sunshine State. Looking great on Information Week Radio, and as always, fantastic to be right here on Twight.
Gentlemen, it is great to have you. Thank you very much for joining us on this special pre-recording day. Let's get right into the blips. The first one comes to us from, well, the world about the Pwn Depot. That's right. Back in September, the Home Depot disclosed that they suffered a massive breach by hackers who exploited a rights elevation vulnerability in Home Depot's private network in order to install custom-built malware on Home Depot's self-checkout systems. That attack compromised the credit card information of more than 56 million customers. This past Thursday, Home Depot announced that in addition to the credit card information, the attackers were able to copy files that contained the email addresses of 53 million customers. Home Depot insists that the files that were taken do not include passwords, PINs, or personal identification information. And in response, Home Depot has pledged to roll out chip and PIN to all its U.S. stores by the end of 2014. Though it is interesting to note that the Home Depot already has chip and PIN in their Canadian stores, and that didn't stop the loss of their Canadian customer information.
Well, safety scuttled the Google barge. Twight covered the mysterious Google barges when they were first seen, then noted when they sailed off into the sunset. Now the Wall Street Journal has uncovered the reason the good ship Google went to the scrapyard. It was all about the safety. See, the Coast Guard has to sign off on any vessel, and the barge is certainly qualified, that carry passengers or commercial cargo, and the Coast Guard could never figure out how thousands of gallons of diesel fuel, highly inflammable components, and the safe evacuation of a bunch of folks, some of them potentially disabled, were going to mix. When even Google's server farms couldn't find a good answer, the barges were hauled off for scrap. Seems there are still some things that even the most clever Google Doodle just can't fix.
Sorry, my mute button stuck. Well, the Microsoft band sure looks like a Fitbit. The band went on sale last Thursday and sold out in Honolulu by Saturday, which really twerked my mind as I came home from the research cruise and found that I couldn't get my hands on one. Urgh. Well, in a move that certainly helped them fly off the shelves, Microsoft didn't follow Apple's lead and lock their wearable to only one platform. This Android, iOS, and Windows Phone compatible device seems like a great way to keep my phone in my pocket and not miss any calls in a noisy environment, or give me a great interface to Cortana, add reminders, keep track of my exercise habits, navigate. Wow, Dick Tracy, here I am. And no more Fitbits in Apple stores.
So you think you know what BYOD stands for? Well, you're wrong. It actually stands for Bring Your Owned Devices. Palo Alto Networks, a security firm in the Silicon Valley, has discovered a new Trojan that infects iOS devices that are attached to infected OS X desktops and laptops. Dubbed WireLurker, the virus looks for USB-connected iPhones or iPads and then installs a hacker-selected payload of malware onto the device. WireLurker seems to hide in software from third-party OS X stores and then infect non-third-party apps on the desktop. Viruses and Trojans like WireLurker aren't new, but this is the first time that they've specifically been used to attack OS X iOS-linked devices with the binary file replacement tactic, and is, of course, particular concern because the Trojan can now infect non-jailbroken iOS devices.
Now, Truthy isn't from 1984, no matter how it looks, say the people who support Truthy. When researchers from Indiana University decided to see how Twitter memes develop, they managed to create their own viral meme, and not in a good way. See, many people think that a system that tracks memes, finds out how they started, renders a value judgment on their accuracy, and suggests ways to counter them could be somewhat big brothery in the wrong hands. It got the attention of some members of Congress who want to defund the research, but now researchers from 5 major institutions have told Congress that they've got it all wrong. It's just about research. The letter says that Truthy just wants to understand how memes happen. All that other censorship and oppression stuff is someone else's department. Keep your eyes on this one. I see the debate going viral the next time there's a slow news day, and I didn't even need AI to tell me that.
Well, speaking of ways to kind of read your mind, Amazon has quietly introduced a new way for Prime members to spend even more money. I'm not embarrassed to say I'm an Amazon Prime member, and like my peers, the free shipping and other perks have made it super easy to spend money. I would even say I prefer to buy on Amazon now because it's just so darn easy. Well, now the Amazon Echo is playing to my spending habits, and if I ask it to order me a pizza, voila, it orders it for me. Or that really cool new Microsoft band, or whatever else. Now it's zero-click buying, and Amazon is laughing all the way to the bank.
Now, if you're one of the many who have turned off Windows automatic updates, be ready to download a whopper of a security patch on Tuesday. Microsoft will be releasing 16 security updates that will patch 5 critical remote code execution exploits, 7 privilege escalation bugs, and a handful of minor glitches. The most interesting of the patches is related to Bulletin 5, which describes a vulnerability only found in Microsoft servers. Well, that's the end of the blips. When we come back, we're going to be doing something a little different for this episode of This Week in Enterprise Tech. Normally, we bring on a guest expert who deep dives into a particular topic. We haven't had just a show with the 3 of us in quite a while. We're going to do that. We're just going to go over some of the stories that we've found fascinating over the past week. But before we do that, let's talk about the first sponsor of this episode of This Week in Enterprise Tech, and it's PagerDuty. The tech we use in the enterprise gets more and more reliable with every generation. Servers failovers, switches route around outages, and storage has redundancies for redundancies of redundancies. But no matter how sophisticated our tools become, things still break when you least expect them to. And when it impacts your customers, you want to be woken from your sleep. PagerDuty is an operations performance platform that delivers visibility and actionable intelligence to help increase the uptime of your apps, servers, websites, and databases. If you rely on your software and services to always be up, PagerDuty is an essential tool. As the hub of your operations, PagerDuty connects all of your systems into a single view where you can see critical events across all your monitoring tools. There are over 100 ready-to-use integrations, including Nagios, New Relic, Keynote, AppDynamics, or you could roll your own with PagerDuty's APIs. Now, decrease your resolution time with PagerDuty. When an incident occurs, it notifies the right team and member based on on-call schedules and personalized alerting preferences. If alerts are missed, PagerDuty will automatically escalate issues to another team member until it's responded to. It also lets you dispatch alerts by automated phone calls, SMS, email, and push notifications, and resolve incidents on the go so that you can live your life even when you're on call. Now, PagerDuty lets you decrease the noise. Incidents are automatically filtered and deduplicated to ensure that only actionable alerts are delivered. And their analytics tools will identify common problems, allowing you to proactively make system improvements and prevent future outages. PagerDuty is relentless when it comes to reliability, fully distributed across multiple data centers and multiple hosting providers. There are also multiple contact method providers per method so that you'll never miss an alert. And you can customize it to fit how you and your team work, regardless of location or size. They're trusted by thousands of companies, including Microsoft, GitHub, Boeing, Nike, Pinterest, and Box. And right now, you can get the right engineer on the right problem at the right time by visiting pagerduty.com/twit to sign up for a free 14-day trial. And for as little as $19 a month, you can increase your uptime with PagerDuty. When you sign up, you'll also be entered for a chance to win a PagerDuty exclusive on-call survival kit. That's pagerduty.com/twit, pagerduty.com/twit. And we thank PagerDuty for their support of This Week in Enterprise Tech. Well, gentlemen, what do you say we get ourselves into the Enterprise Bites? This one is kind of a no-brainer. This has been the big talk around the Enterprise this past week. It's all about Microsoft's freemium Office. Now, Microsoft has been changing their strategy over, I'd say, the past 18 to 24 months to focus on services and devices rather than the maze of SKUs that have been the hallmark of Redmond. Now, their latest big news was the announcement that they're creating and editing content with Microsoft products on mobile devices would be free. Well, free-ish. Users of Android or iOS can now use versions of Word, Excel, and PowerPoint without an Office 365 subscription. They're retiring the Office mobile platform and instead going with the branding for Word, Excel, and PowerPoint, perhaps picking up the clue that more names for the same product isn't necessarily better. Now, some features like placing pictures or some of the more advanced formatting options will only be available with the premium subscription version of the apps, which is why a lot of folks are calling this a freemium app. But still, it's a pretty big move. Let me start with you, Curtis. We've been seeing this collapsing of the SKUs for quite some time. In fact, it's one of the most requested features at any Microsoft developer conference, and that is, stop making it so confusing. Why is there 50 different SKUs for one product just because you want to be able to sell at different price points to different groups? Why not give me a single SKU or a handful of SKUs that make it possible for me to easily sell your products? Is this the next move that we're seeing here, sort of cutting back on Microsoft Mobile Office, Microsoft Mobile Premium Office, Microsoft 365 Office, and just saying, look, it's free, get it on your phone, and pay for the features that you want?
Well, I think Microsoft would tell you, and they did for years, that this vast array of pricing options was in response to what their customers wanted. You know, basically that, especially on the enterprise, that they had so many different types of customers with so many different sets of requirements that the different SKUs were in response to trying to offer the lowest cost to each individual customer. Now, the downside of that was that it really required you to have an individual or even a department to figure out which of those options was the lowest cost. Microsoft is now pulling back on that largely because they want to get out of the business of selling permanent licenses. They really want to get into the functionality rental business. In other words, you pay them an annual subscription price and you get the functionality of personal productivity products. I think what we're seeing with the mobile devices more than anything else is a response to Google making real inroads with their applications for BYOD and for mobile devices. What you see here is Microsoft saying, we're going to offer you the functionality for free, but if this is anything like the previous versions of the Office products for iOS, it will only really work well when you save it to the Microsoft online storage system. What they're getting in return for this free functionality is lock-in to their cloud infrastructure. And from the Satya Nadella point of view, offering an existing product at no cost in exchange for ecosystem lock-in, it's a cheap way to get those customers.
I really like that. I like the fact that if you look at Microsoft, a lot of people looked at those SKUs as the cash cow. And you're dead on. The reason why they developed so many SKUs wasn't because they wanted to confuse people. It's because they always wanted the smaller business, the smaller operation, or the individual to have a cheaper SKU, the SKU that works for them rather than have the one-size-fits-all. And it just turned into a big cluster SKU. But this idea of trading that cash cow for lock-in, I could see how that could be incredibly attractive to Satya Nadella and the new team at Microsoft. Chee, let me go over to you. Those SKUs were such a cash cow. Do you see this trading of the massive army of SKUs for lower price but higher overall average profit plus a lock-in as a worthy trade-off?
Well, first off, that's an iPad Mini 3 running PowerPoint. Yay! No, it makes total sense. Just keep in mind, having the SKU for the less expensive version of Office or whatever for the small and medium-sized business wasn't working as well as a lot of people thought it was. Just look at how many offices are still running really, really ancient versions of PowerPoint, Words, Excel, and so forth. A lot of people just got it with their workstation or their laptop and never upgraded. So Microsoft was walking away from an awful lot of money on the table. So by going to something that's a subscription basis and trying to upsell people into always having the latest and greatest, it reduces support costs, but it also increases the amount of money that Microsoft will actually receive instead of having ancient versions just sitting around never getting upgraded that's costing Microsoft a ton of money to support and patch and so forth. I think it's a great way of getting people out of products that are inherently insecure, inherently problematic for getting hackers access into machines, and it reduces the amount of overhead that Microsoft is going to have to do for patch Thursdays or patch Tuesdays, whatever it is now.
Yeah, exactly. Curtis, let me ask you this. Last week, we saw Microsoft move towards allowing everyone to use a per-user licensing rather than a per-device. And, of course, we know that Microsoft lives on per-device. They like giving you another license for every single device that you may ever run a Microsoft product, which was problematic when we started talking about VDI, because exactly what does it mean to run a VDI instance of, say, your Office desktop on your tablet? Well, is this just the next move? We've seen them simplify the licensing on the desktop. Now you can get Windows Enterprise on basically anything that might be connected to your Office, which was a big boon for BYOD. And now we see them saying, oh, and by the way, Office is going to be free on your mobile device, so there's really no other reason to use any other platform on even your BYOD device. Is this a play for BYOD?
Oh, I think it's a recognition that BYOD is a model that's going to be with us for a long time to come. For the longest time, Microsoft, and in fairness, pretty much everyone else, built their business on this clear division between the products that an enterprise used and products that people used in their home lives. Now, there might have been some commonality, but as we've seen in the discussions about SKUs, there were differences in the way they were licensed and often differences in some level of functionality. What the companies are recognizing now is that these are coming together, and I think we're going to see more and more of that. Now, I don't know that we will ever see people offering something like SAP functionality for home budgeting, but I think we are going to see more and more companies try to get the employees and therefore their employers locked into an ecosystem. In years past, one of the reasons that value-added resellers and systems integrators were so important as parts of the business model for software companies was that they helped provide an answer to the question of who owns the customer. In other words, who does the customer go to and say, this is the company that really provides the bulk of my computing experience? Now, Microsoft resellers have done that. We've seen a lot of that erode as people decided that they were going to be iOS or Mac OS users. What we're now seeing is Google, Microsoft, and I strongly suspect coming out of the woodwork before too long, Amazon, saying, we want to be the company that owns the consumer. Now, we'll let other people hook into our ecosystem, but we want people and companies to brand themselves as our customer. That's the real battle that's going forward, and there are going to be a lot of casualties along the way. I've seen some people suggesting that companies like Dropbox could be casualties because of all of the people who say, I'll just get my unlimited storage from Microsoft or from Amazon or from Google. It's going to be a bloody battlefield going on for both enterprise and home users. And I tell you what, it's going to be fascinating to see the different camps as they develop.
Chee, let me throw that to you. Last question on this topic will go to you. Curtis is talking about this battlefield, and I totally get the lock-in. That makes sense that you've got Amazon, you've got Google, you've got Microsoft, you've got Apple, all trying to go for that lock-in, because the lock-in in the current trend is how you're going to make your money in the future. However, I got to ask, is it too late? I mean, I like this move from Microsoft. I know it's going to be used by a lot of people, but I look around and I see a lot of people have already migrated over to Google Docs, or they're using a free Office variant. Is it enough for Microsoft to now say, well, you can use all our apps on your mobile devices for free, and there's a premium charge if you want to use the additional advanced features? Is it enough to bring them back, or is this just stemming the tide?
I don't know. I haven't had a chance to talk to a lot of people about it yet, but if I'm any indication, I just took all my Google apps and pushed them to a different page in a folder on my iPad, and I put all the Microsoft tools right at the very first page of my productivity folder, because I'm a lot more used to them. There's a lot of cool things that Google has, but I keep running into things that I can't do. So I keep falling back to writing my papers in Microsoft Word. I keep falling back to using PowerPoint. Microsoft did a really, really good job, and I was only using Google Docs because I was forced to do it. Now, the other part of the game is on, whether I'm locked in or not, is how well do they integrate into the system that I use. I use Dropbox a lot because it's just one of the folders on a Mac OS X device. OneNote is a folder on a Windows device. I'd really rather have one that I could go to either one. I want plugins so it works on all of that. There's an awful lot of things that it needs to happen. And Microsoft still has done, in my mind, a better job at handling Office productivity. And Google actually needs to take a few lessons from them.
Yeah. And, one more quick note is, don't forget that Microsoft has also made Office 365 free to anyone with a .edu address, which means that they're kind of pulling an Apple here. They're going after the younger generation, saying, wait a minute, if we can hook you into our walled garden, if we can get your buy-in when you're still a student, maybe you'll carry that over into your enterprise days. Now, let's go ahead and jump into our next story. This one's a little bit different. It's going to hopefully incite a bit more anger, maybe a bit more discussion between the three of us. And that is, could a bounty system change the way that enterprises hunt for trolls and hackers? This story comes to us from GameSkinny. It's a video game story, which I know a few of you are going to wonder why it's in an enterprise show. But if you've been paying attention to Gamergate, then you know that game developer Brianna Wu was harassed by an army of trolls, stalkers, and outright criminals who eventually forced her from her home with death threats. Oh, Brianna was particularly infuriating for the stalkers because she refused to be bullied into silence. In fact, she kept speaking out. It's one of those rules. You don't do that to trolls. You ignore trolls. You shut them out. You try to make yourself a small target as possible. She did the opposite. But now she's fighting back with a novel approach to the cyberbullying, a bounty. Brianna has created a foundation that is putting up rewards for information leading to the prosecution of those who were sending her death threats. The first arrest will net $11,000 for the tipper. The second arrest will lead to a reward of $5,500, and the third arrest will earn a $2,750 reward. Now, here's the thing. I know that this story is about gaming. I know that the story is about one woman's crusade against people who just kind of maladjusted, not nice, or who said things because of the veil of anonymity. But that's the point. This was enabled by the veil of anonymity, just like a lot of the attacks that are being made on corporate networks, on enterprises, both in terms of hacking and exploitation and in trolling, is enabled by anonymity. My question to the two of you is, if Brianna is using cold, hard cash to try to break through that one defense that they have, anonymity, could enterprises, could corporations do the same? What's to keep an enterprise from saying, hey, we've just had this exploit. We are going to give you $500,000 if you give us information that leads to the arrest of the person or the people most behind this attack. Do you think that might have any effect? Let me throw this over to you first, Curtis. I mean, when we think about hackers, when we think about the people who will use these exploits, they're very good about personal security. They're very good about maintaining their anonymity. But if they ever have to work with somebody else, another hacker, another black hat, they will have to reveal a little bit of personal information, and they're going to be made even more wary if now there's a bounty being placed on them. Is this something that we could even look at as a potential in the enterprise?
On the whole, I'm going to say no, and here's why. It's twofold. One is that I think for most companies, they're going to look at what the real cost of the breaches are, and are going to decide that no reward that would have an impact is worth it. I mean, this is the same discussion that we've had in many ways about other kinds of security. We always ask, why don't companies pay more for security? And the answer is they've done the math and have figured that it's easier to deal with the aftermath of a breach than it is to pay for the upfront security to prevent the breach. The other thing is that Brianna was dealing, by and large, we think, with people who are harassing her from within the U.S., likely based on some of the threats within a relatively close physical proximity to her. When was the last time we heard of a huge hacking scandal that originated within even North America, forget the United States? Most of these days are coming from jurisdictions where getting U.S. law enforcement to be able to reach out and touch someone, even if they're identified, is somewhere between very difficult and impossible. I think this is a lovely idea, and I can imagine some very limited areas in which it might work, but I don't think it's going to have the same kind of impact on the enterprise side that it could potentially have for someone who is being physically threatened here in the U.S.
Chee, I understand what Curtis is saying. I mean, we actually talked about this last year at the predictions episode of This Week in Enterprise Tech, when we talked about what it would take for retail organizations to start taking their security more seriously. And I believe it was Oliver who was the one who said, look, it's all about the bottom line. When it costs them more to lose all of this personal information than it does for them to pay for the security, then they'll pay for the security. Well, in this last year, we've seen that move. Retailers have now realized, you know what, our equations were wrong. We were wrong about how much it would cost for us to have such a huge PR nightmare and to have to protect all of our customers' information. And look at Home Depot losing all 56 million credit cards, 53 million email addresses. Could we get to a point where a bounty becomes regular? I understand what Curtis is saying. You know, you've got extra legality issues here. But even if you don't pay a bounty, just having bounties out there has got to affect the way that black hats would work with one another. I mean, I would know for a fact that if I were still doing any sort of penetration testing, I would definitely not want to share my tools or anything that leads back to me, because I'm afraid that someone's going to turn me in for a bounty.
Well, I actually just threw a link into the chat room, and it's a link to the talk that Dan Gear gave as a keynote for Black Hat. And while a lot of things, he started talking about security to the edge and things like that, one of the other things he did mention was the concept of bounties. Maybe not bounties on the individual hackers, but more of designated hitters, having an organization that was designed to go and find these people, and the corporations would pay them for extra protection. Just like you're paying for an antivirus, well, I'm going to pay for a set of designated hitters to go out and gather evidence on hacking groups and make it really difficult for them to operate. So I'm going to take the opposite side. I'm going to say, yeah, I think a bounty is going to be good. I think it needs to be moderated just a bit. I don't think it should be a free-for-all. I don't want the internet to turn into the wild, wild west with shootouts at high noon. The collateral damage would be horrible. But if we did have designated hitters, people that were careful about it, that were going to limit collateral damage, and they're going to make sure that they actually got the people that are causing the damage, I'd love to see that. And Dan Gear actually started proposing a few of those types of things, and who knows, it might work. U.S. government, NSA, come on, guys. Maybe it's time you went, maybe not quite on the offensive, but at least start coordinating with the private sector on how to gather the evidence and limit collateral damage. I'd love to see something like that happen.
Yeah. Maybe it is just pie in the sky. Maybe this is just wishful thinking, but it would be kind of nice to have another weapon in the arsenal to maybe make hackers and stalkers and trolls think twice about what they're doing. Let's do one more enterprise bite before we take a break. This one is about, well, maybe the future of what your data center and what your application and what your server farm looks like. Now, for Google, virtualization is so last generation. We covered in previous episodes of This Week in Enterprise Tech how Google is using containerized data centers. Now, these are literally 40-foot shipping containers that are packed to the lid with all the equipment that you need to have a self-contained data center. The reason why you want this is because it has great results if you need temporary power in a particular place. You can ship around massive amounts of computing power and storage in anywhere in the world using the same system that's already set up to move these shipping containers, and drop a data center into an area that needs to be covered for a particular event, or an area that needs a bit more horsepower for something that it's planning on doing. It's an idea that several computing giants, including Microsoft, Amazon, and others, have used to great effect over the past couple of years. But now Google is saying, well, no, we're going to take you one step further. They're going to virtualize the idea of a containerized data center. Now, regular virtualization takes a machine and it adds a layer of abstraction so that several OSs or applications can run concurrently and autonomously on that machine. Google's new tech is called the Google Container Engine, or GKE, and it's actually a more advanced version of the operating system that ran Google's containerized data centers. It was the software that bound together these 40-foot shipping containers so that they could act like a data center. Now, instead of virtualizing a single server, the GKE virtualizes the application or the service itself. It adds a layer of abstraction so that Google is able to wrap up that application, and it becomes a shipping container, a metaphorical shipping container that can run anywhere. That means in the cloud, on-premise, in a remote data center, in one of those 40-foot shipping containers. The application doesn't care because to it, everything looks the same. Let me throw this over to you first, Hubert, because this seems like such a subtle shift up from what we have with virtualization and containerized data centers. But I love this idea. This is sort of a holy grail for IT folks, right? To wrap up your services so that it literally doesn't matter what hardware it's running on.
Well, I just threw another URL into the chat room. Hello, chat room. Arthur C. Clarke actually started talking about a lot of these things where it was just kind of behind the scenes. I could go and run my app anywhere. So Vanavir, the main protagonist in this story, goes and runs his bridge simulations on whoever happened to have the lowest rates at that time of the day. It's been a very, very common theme in science fiction. And I think Google's just, science fact is catching up with science fiction. In fact, Curtis and I actually pontificated in, I think it was chapter 10 in our cloud computing book, on how eventually the abstraction layer of cloud computing is going to come to the point where I don't care if it's VMware, I don't care if it's Microsoft, I don't care if it's Amazon, I don't care if it's Google. I just care about can I run my service, and is it economical for me to run it? So that computing becomes a true utility. A telephone is a telephone is a telephone. And I think we're slowly moving towards a computer is a computer is a computer. I don't care what operating system is running because my apps are all in the cloud. I think it is the future. I think a lot of people really and truly hate how much learning they have to do in order to run things on a Mac versus a Windows versus a Chromebox versus an iPad. They just want to get their work done. They don't care what it is. And I think the abstraction of running it in the cloud, regardless of whether it's in a 40-foot container or whether it's in a traditional data center, users don't care, right?
Yeah, a really good point. Curtis, let me ask you about this. When we started to see VDI come onto the scene, and we're talking within the last 2 years that it actually became possible to do virtual desktop infrastructure with any sort of performance, that made the end user hardware more of a commodity. It meant that I didn't have to care about what I was running it on, being my laptop, my desktop, my tablet, my phone, whatever it was going to be. I just got that experience. It's what Chee was talking about. I just want it to work. I just want to have my apps, my setup, my desktop anywhere I am. So it makes sense that Google's now doing this because we virtualize the front end. Google's saying, well, why don't we virtualize the back end as well and make it so that all that hardware that was in the data center is now truly a commodity. In fact, you could go one step further and say, since Google is turning all of this into an abstraction layer, I could now run this on competing platforms as long as I put in the right hooks. I could run it on Microsoft Azure. I could run it on Amazon's Elastic Cloud, and the user would know no different, and the IT administrator would know no different. This is the future, right?
Well, it's the future. It has some interesting implications. Among them is that in the same way that this is true for network virtualization and everything else, ease for the customer, and even in this case for the IT administrator, does mean that somewhere down in that stack, there are people who have to deal with vastly more complication. So it really isn't eliminating complication. It's just pushing it further down the stack, and one could say concentrating it in the hands of the people who have to figure out how those applications talk to the hooks in all of the different platforms. The other thing that I'll say is that I think that what this does is place a premium on the systems that come prepared to be part of this virtual container. In other words, a lot of people are going to say, well, this should be an increasing boon for the white box manufacturers. And it could turn out that way. But I think what you're going to see are companies like HP, like Lenovo, like Dell, saying we can put together systems, racks, and entire containers that come pre-configured both in the hardware, the software, and the management infrastructure to be part of one of these virtualized containers. It's going to increase the competition in some interesting ways down on that level, even though, frankly, the people who have traditionally made a lot of these decisions up at the enterprise level might not care at all.
Chee, one last bit on this, that I see an advantage of computing in this way, and that this is one of the best disaster recovery platforms ever. If I can wrap up my entire enterprise, literally everything I do in the back end, it means that no matter what the disaster is, I just have to find bare metal. If I can find bare metal, or if I can get a connection to the cloud where I can use resources that are remote, I can have my enterprise back up and running exactly the same way that it was before whatever disaster it was that struck my company. I mean, can you think of a better backup solution than saying it doesn't matter what hardware I'm running on?
Yeah, and I can also see the flip side of that coin, and that, oh, which building is my boiler room operation going to be in today? So it could become a very big law enforcement issue. Trying to track down a rogue enterprise preying on stock investors. But yeah, when you can basically light up an enterprise anywhere, does it even matter? Does it even matter what country you're in? Does it matter whether you're in the middle of the Pacific? Could you be Mr. Oracle and buying an island off the coast of Oahu and running your enterprise there? It's a nice bit of science fiction at the moment, but we're not far from science fact.
I love it. Well, gentlemen, when we come back, I'd like Cheebert to show us some of his vacation photos, because he actually had an extreme networking challenge. We want to talk all about it. But before we do that, let's go ahead and take another break to thank the second sponsor of this episode of Twiet, and it's Mandrill. Now, these days, the vast majority of our attention is given to the latest in social media, the greatest in messaging, and the trendiest in collaboration apps. But for serious businesses and enterprises, there has never been a more important tool, still, after all these years of its inception, than email. That's why I am happy to have on the Twiet Riot Mandrill, a scalable, reliable, and secure email infrastructure service trusted by more than 300,000 customers. What is Mandrill, you might be asking yourself? Well, it's the easiest way to manage, integrate, deliver, track, and analyze email. It sports detailed delivery reports, advanced analytics, and a friendly interface that makes it easy for your entire team, from developers to marketers, to monitor and evaluate email performance across your business. You can use Mandrill to send automated one-to-one emails like password resets and welcome messages, as well as marketing emails and customized newsletters. Mandrill started as an idea back in 2010, and now they're the largest email-as-a-service platform on the market. Because they've geolocated their servers to maximize response time, Mandrill can deliver your email in milliseconds, and they've given you all the webhooks and analytics that developers need to check delivery rates and all the documentation to make integration a breeze. Now, speaking of integration, Mandrill is easy to set up and integrate with your existing apps. It comes with a beautiful interface, flexible template options, custom tagging, and advanced tracking and reports. It's also the only email infrastructure service with a mobile app that lets you monitor delivery and troubleshoot from wherever you are. Mandrill is powerful, scalable, and affordable, but you know what? You don't have to take our word for it. Right now, Mandrill is offering a special deal to the members of the Twit audience, so you can try it for yourself. Sign up at mandrill.com, promo code TWIT, and you'll receive 50,000 free email sends per month for their first 6 months of service. That's mandrill.com, promo code TWIT. Once more, mandrill.com, promo code TWIT. And we thank Mandrill for their support of This Week in Enterprise Tech. Cheebert, before you got the pink eye from a bunkmate, you did get a chance to do some very interesting science and engineering out in the middle of the Pacific. Can you tell us a little bit about what you were doing on that trawler in the middle of the ocean?
Well, that trawler is the RV Kilomoana. It's a 187-foot swath hole. And I have pictures. That happens to be the Kilomoana at temporary mooring at Aloha Tower. We have our own harbor facility, but it's a pretty big ship. Think of it as a catamaran standing on top of two submarines. And on the right-hand side, you see those stacks coming up. Those are 5 Caterpillar diesels. So it is a diesel-electric boat. It is one of the cleanest boats on the ocean. And it was designed for us and paid by the Office of Naval Research. Thank you so very much, taxpayer. So if we go to the next slide, you can see a little bit of what it can do. It actually mows the lawn every time we go out. We'll actually go and map the seafloor. In fact, the entire Pacific is mapped down to 3-meter resolution. We're also working on 1-meter resolution. But in this case, we're using the A-frame crane on the back to go and drop stuff into the ocean. So next slide. Ta-da. So, of course, the obligatory Waikiki Beach. Next one will be Diamond Head. So it was a beautiful day when we left. And unfortunately, by the time we got 100 kilometers north of the island of Oahu, a squall came in. So if we can just keep going, we'll just kind of blow through these slides. So there's Jason from the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institute. It is one of the very few remote operated vehicles that are capable of operating at that depth. In this case, almost 5,000 meters. That is the basic sensor package that we dropped down there. It happens to have a bunch of instruments, and that orange cable is what we plug in. And we'll just keep going through. That's the Jason crew. The labs are wired up. That's actually a bench version of the main observatory node. It's actually only about 16 inches in diameter, but it fits into a 24-inch diameter tube. Those are some of the watertight cables. Those are actually filled with the oil so that it doesn't crush the cables. And that connector you see is about $15,000. It is actually designed so we can connect power and communications under the water, even at 500 atmospheres of pressure. Next. So there's the A-frame. Now, the Jason system is not just a single vehicle. It is actually a control van on the surface. That piece that you see there is called Medea. It sits down at the bottom of the lifting cable, and Jason kind of goes sideways off it. So it's about a 100-meter cable off Medea to Jason, and Jason can go within a 100-meter diameter arc of Medea. So Medea goes up and down and controls where Jason can go. That blue crane is what lifts Jason on and off the deck. There's the new camera dome that we just put down. Thank you, Axis webcams. So that's actually in a dome that's about an inch thick of specially treated glass so that the camera can operate in a 1-atmosphere environment even though it's 3 miles underwater. Next, please. And so in order to unwrap those cables, we have to have pins and lanyards that are big enough that stay open even when they've dropped down through the water so that Jason's claw can go and grab them under the bungees so that we can then unroll the cables and plug in. Next. So it is a hard hat area. Everybody, is supposed to be wearing both a life vest and a hard hat whenever the chains come down. Jason is, I think if I remember right, about 6 tons. It is a very heavy vehicle. It's got a lot of instrumentation in there, and it's controlled from this man. That is one of the Jason pilots. He actually has a pantograph so that he can drive the arms. So he can either drive the vehicle or drive the arms. So there's one of our instrument packages going over the deck. We actually drop it over with the A-frame. In this case, what we do is once it's in the water, we actually drop it and it free falls. Now, that's the end of our cable, the HOF4. It's an old AT&T cable that's been recycled. Now, notice to the left, there's the piece of equipment. We actually dropped that piece of equipment from 3 miles above. And it dropped within less than a meter of the target.
How long does it take for something to fall 3 miles through the ocean?
They fall at about 30 meters per minute. So it took, maybe 6 hours.
That's not great.
So there's the main observatory. Keep going. And you can see the special cables plugging. There's Jason plugging in. So we can actually plug in under pressure. More of the Jason control van. Everything's running in UTC, by the way, guys. There's the camera dome getting put together. And so there's the view that the pilot has. And, those giant spikes are so that Jason can actually go and lift things out of the mud.
Oh.
So you can see the connector both the male and female side, we actually keep pushing them on until those little tabs flip in. So you see yellow. When you don't see yellow anymore, that means it's all the way connected.
Wait, but that's exposed to salt water, though, right?
Yes, it is.
What is that? That's just data bus, or that's power bus too?
It's data and power and optical.
Oh, jeez.
So what happens is the pins push those in. It's a special rolling block. The connector is filled with a special type of oil. And each connector is only good for about 150 cycles, so 150 connections. And then we have to take it apart and refurbish it. So we count how many times we plug in.
Oh, okay. So no seawater ever
gets pushed away.
No seawater ever gets in because you got the positive pressure of the oil that basically just forces everything out of the connector.
Correct. And while liquids are essentially incompressible, liquids will compress a little bit. So we use an oil to keep the seawater out, which seawater is inherently conductive. So by using the oil, we don't have any kinds of shorts and so forth. So anyway, that's actually the view that the pilot sees. And keep going. Those are the floats. We had to make the experiment packages heavy enough so they'll stay on the bottom, but light enough that they won't get so fast that they'll crash into the bottom. So those are actually glass balls with a hard hat around it so we can make them more buoyant so they fall slower. And then that set of glass balls happens to be connected to the next slide, which was a device that had failed on our first go-around. So we actually tied those balls to it to make it positively buoyant so we could get it all the way to the surface. That took about 4.5, 5 hours to get to the surface.
And typically when you say fail, you just mean that the pressure just killed it.
No, actually, the pressure didn't kill it. There is, shall we say, maybe some design problems. We had what's called a ground fault. The seawater is ground for us. So if we don't have, if something's not quite perfect, the electrical signals don't work well because we don't have a natural ground. We don't drive a rod into the earth. So with the ground fault, the experiment package wasn't working. So we brought it up so we can go determine exactly what went wrong so we can learn from it. So that's the secondary node, or the AMM. That orange water heater-like thing is all syntactic foam. It's what makes it lighter, slightly lighter than air. It's actually a whole bunch of foam with glass beads in them. It's insanely expensive stuff, and it's actually very hard. It's like a brick. But it's the only type of foam you can use that won't get crushed. In fact, one of the things that one of the crew members do is they draw on the side of styrofoam, like Jamba Juice size cups. They draw painting, famous paintings. He's very fond of Salvador Dali and people like that. And here's one. This used to be the size of a Jamba Juice cup.
That's a lot of pressure. And every time you go down or come up, it takes at least 6 hours?
Something like that. You can actually change the amount of buoyancy. So if the package is very durable, it can go up faster. But anywhere from 30 to 50 meters per minute is kind of normal.
Okay.
Okay, and there's the camera tripod. It's actually the dome on top of a tripod. On the inside of those legs, we actually have stick-on measuring sticks so we can get an idea of size. So that way, if a fish or a squid or a shrimp goes by, we can actually judge the actual size of the beastie. So, and then you can see the rope with the floats keeping the basic sensor package up, those long ladder-like things that you can see going back to front and side to side. When the sensor package went on the ocean floor, we actually pulled the pins on the bungees, and Jason raises those masts up, and there's a polycarbonate latch, so it latches into place. Okay. And for our sponsors, we actually put a banner down there with all the logos of our major sponsors, which I think is in the next. Yeah, you can kind of see it there. So that is in view of the cameras, and it's going to be there until we do the next deployment. So people like Dell SonicWall and Cisco and Curvature Corporation, which is national hardware resellers, and Seabird and a lot of our other sponsors have donated an insane amount of equipment to make this happen. Our closest competitor is Neptune Canada, and I think they're something like $500 or $600 million and counting, and they're not completely online yet. We actually are using a lot of recycled equipment, and the Low Cabled Observatory was a deal for the U.S. tax dollars at $2.5 million. Now, out of that, I'm just shy of $1 million, I believe, in donations in kind from people like Dell, SonicWall, and Cisco. So what you're seeing here are the different tools. That's the tool tray for Jason that slides in and out. So there's all kinds of different things in. There's even a scrub brush, so we actually scrubbed the silt off the banner before we left it. We actually have a knife, so that cable that you see in the background is on a set of floats, and we need to cut the floats away. So Jason actually landed those spikes. Burke was asking about the spikes. That box that says number 1, it's the syntactic foam. Jason landed on that to peg the experiment package to the ground. And then one hand grabbed the cable, the other hand had a big knife and went and cut it away. So lots and lots and lots of fun.
So this observatory it tells you everything from pressure to temperature to earthquakes, and it's all cabled back to the islands via a fiber run that you just draped along the floor?
Yeah, actually, it's a legacy cable. It was HA4. It was the first generation fiber optic cable from AT&T that they retired. So they donated it to us. It was transferred to the university for a whole $1, and AT&T got to take a $2 billion write-off on that. Thank you, AT&T. And we had a retired AT&T engineer that worked with us to create a special Moldex board that converts the proprietary AT&T optical signaling into 100FX. So we actually have 100 meg full duplex going down to the bottom of the ocean.
And you actually, one of the features that you've got, actually, if you go to my computer, you can hear streaming audio from the observatory. But I noticed that you're using Real Player. I think we need to get some members of the Twilight Right to help you redesign your UI.
Well, Real Networks did donate a Helix Universal Server and Helix Producer. So one of the things I'm going to be doing when I get back to work is I'm going to be bringing up an H.264 and a 3GPP stream and probably a WMV stream for the Windows folks so that we can get away from the proprietary Real Player. Now, actually, if you go in, you can see more pictures and so forth. However, if you go back up, to the top of the page.
What's this? Is this? Oh, you make me log in.
Yeah, sorry, dude. If you go to, where is it? On the library and go to audio video library. And if you have audio, you can actually hear some whales. Or we also have video.
Ooh.
So you can actually see video of the construction of the system. I think if you go down a little bit more.
You had to put a disclaimer. Wait, is that the thing at the top?
Yeah, that's a buoy. This is some standard B-roll that we have. We visit that particular spot in the ocean a lot, at least once a month. And we actually send a rosette, which is like a gun barrel or whatever, a whole rotary of. Actually, you can actually see Jason's claw moving in that one, and you can see Jason moving around.
So basically, you guys were playing a claw game 3 miles under the ocean.
Yes, indeed. Two claws.
That's too. Cheebert, you get the coolest jobs. And this is a networking gig, by the way. So if any of you are network administrators, maybe you could sign on with Jason.
Yeah. Anyway, the University of Hawaii also has an ROV that right now is got problems. We're working with the manufacturer to fix it, but it's called Luukai, Luukai. Kai means ocean. I'm not sure what Luu means. But anyway, the whole idea behind it is we're going to have a JSON-like ROV capable of servicing the observatory. So the main components are the middle part is the main observatory, and each of those tubes at the bottom are about 10 feet long, well, a little under 10 feet, maybe 8 feet, and 24 inches in diameter, and they are milled out of a solid billet of titanium. They're $175,000 each, and because it's such a high-risk milling job, there is no warranty.
Right.
So the first one we got was cracked. So all we got back from that was the scrap cost of the titanium. So there's two of them. And that's what makes this really a challenge. Whenever I talk to the NASA guys in the next building, they always say, "Oh, it's so hard to design satellites." And I go, dude, at best you're dealing with -1 atmosphere. Just don't talk to me until you have to deal with 500 atmospheres.
Well, Cheebert, I think you win the crown for coolest networking gig ever, sir. Thank you very much for sharing little bits and pieces about your journey out into the Pacific Ocean. Now, of course, the folks at home are going to want to know where they can find more about this project. Where do they go?
Well, the best place, and where we're going to be doing all announcements, and where the public links to those cameras are going to be, is at Aloha, ALOHA.manoa, MANOA.hawaii.edu. And I'm going to throw that into the chat room.
There you go.
And there you go. So just as I get better, get rid of my pink eye, and I'm not contagious, I'm going to go and set up. I'm actually using Intel Nooks to digest the video stream. I'm actually taking H.264 off the Axis webcams, digesting it, and then sending it out multiple formats to the Helix Universal server. And I think I'm also going to send to a Ustream channel.
Fantastic.
But it's whale season. Go on and listen. I've got a Shoutcast server. You can listen to whales live on the internet.
Very cool. Thank you, Cheebert. Thank you so very much. And folks,
Welcome.
I'm sorry, but we've reached the end of this episode of This Week in Enterprise Tech. It's always a pleasure to spend time with my two favorite geeks in the whole wild universe. I do want to give you time to say goodbye. Cheebert, of course, we already know about the Aloha Observatory, but is there anything else that you want the Twilight Ride to know about or be paying attention to in the coming weeks?
Well, I'll tell you. I finally got my IO-Safe article. It's actually IO-Safe in Synology out. They got an Editor's Choice Award, so Synology is very happy about that. So is IO-Safe. You know, how can you not like a NAS that you can burn and flood and it still gets your data back?
I'd agree with you. I just finished my review of the 1513 as well, so that will be going out next week. Curtis, what about you? What's going over on Information Week Radio? I want to thank you again for joining me. I know you have a hard out here, so I want to give you some time to plug whatever it is that you want to plug.
I appreciate it. Yeah, we are continuing to do a lot with Information Week Radio. One of the interesting things we've got going is Information Week University. These are 5-class audio courses that people can take to learn all kinds of stuff about cloud, about infrastructure, about managing enterprise class IT. Love for the folks to come and check those out over at informationweek.com. Some really good stuff happening there.
Curtis, Brian, always a pleasure. And of course, it's also a pleasure to have you. That's right, our loyal viewer, our listener, our watcher, the person who comes back week after week for all the enterprise goodness we can pack into an hour of show. That's right, you're listening to the best dang enterprise podcast in the world, according to 9 out of 10 deep sea submersibles. And we want to do something for you. We want to give you a way to get This Week in Enterprise Tech onto the device of your choice each week automatically. Just go to our show page at twit.tv/Twilight. There you'll find a list of all of our episodes in case you want to download our back catalog, or if you use the drop-down menu as a way to automatically subscribe so that every episode shows up on your iPhone or your iPad, your Android tablet or phone, your Mac, your PC, your desktop, your laptop. No matter how you want it, we're going to give it to you that way because, well, We love you. Also, don't forget to subscribe. Follow me on Twitter. You can find me at twitter.com/PadreSJ. If you go ahead and follow me, you can suggest topics for future episodes of This Week in Enterprise Tech. If you have a guest or a subject that you think needs covering, why not do a shout out, and I'll see what we can do to accommodate you. And you'll find out what I do in between shows here on the Twit TV network. Don't forget that we do this show live every week on Mondays, normally on Mondays at 2:30 p.m. Pacific time. If you go to live.twit.tv and watch before and after, you can see the pre-show, the post-show, and everything that comes in between, including all the bits that we take out in the final edit. It's kind of a way to spy on how the sausage is made. And as long as you're watching live, why not jump into our chat room at irc.twit.tv. There you'll meet some of the funniest engineers, some of the greatest members of the Twit TV army, and you'll be able to talk to me because you're right up there. The chat room's sitting right above my monitor so that I can see what you want answered during the show. Finally, I want to thank everyone here who makes this show possible, to Lisa, to Leo, to my normal producer, Brian Cranky Hippo Burnett. But today, thanks to Victor, who is standing in because, well, Filipinos got to represent. Until next time, I'm Father Robert Ballecer, and remember, if you want to know what's going on in the Enterprise, just keep quiet.